Well, good evening, everyone. Those of you, few in the Zendo, I just heard that it was a personal practice day, so thank you for those who are present. And those who are participating by Zoom, and those on YouTube Live, and those who may see this years from now. We've got a whole time being going on here, actually, if you think about it. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here again with the Upaya community, which is so dear to me. I'm thinking, though, I do need to update my bio. I think probably I first started doing things with Upaya about 10 years ago when 30 years of Dharma practice was accurate. It's now about 40. So anyway, it's thank you for that beautiful introduction, Mary. I'm really grateful. And I thank you for the reminder that the chaplains are in the middle of an intensive time. And it's true. This is kind of perfect, I think. And I love talking about Kanon, Kuan Yin. So here we go. If I were giving this talk in the Upaya Zendo, where I'm sure some of you have been and some of you are, and as I have given talks there before, the speaker has their back to the altar and to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, with that upraised sword to cut through delusion. But in front of the speaker, if they look past the people who are gathered around, at the far end of the Zendo, through the open doors, there is a beautiful statue of Kanon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, sometimes known as Kanon or Kanzeon in Japanese, Kuan Yin in Chinese. And one of the things that I love about this statue, she's standing just a little bit under life size, depending on what life size you are. And she's leaning forward, which I think is significant, leaning forward to meet the sufferings of the world. And there's an image of her for you. So I really think that she represents something very important. She is believed throughout Asia to always respond if she is called upon to help. And there are many ways that she is depicted. This standing form, which you can also see behind me here, is only one of her many, many forms. Sometimes she is depicted fearlessly riding a dragon or a lion or a wild wave. In some, she is standing on mountains or as large as mountains herself. Her robes are often wind-whipped because, you know, it's pretty dramatic to meet the sufferings of the world. Sometimes she is held by the full moon. Sometimes she is pouring out the nectar of healing for the world, or in the posture of royal ease, or even, it's very unusual, but I saw this in Japan. You'll see a photo in just a moment, even holding an unborn child. So Kodo, if we're going to have a few images just to give you a sense of this. Many of these are my own photographs from Japan. Some of them are from elsewhere. Notice the size of that one. I particularly like the Kuan Yin riding the dragon. This is actually from a huge cemetery in southern Japan. And I'm very moved by that image.
Sorry, it's not letting me go to the next one.
It's okay. I think we're at the end of those anyway. Oh, there's one more. And this one is from a women's retreat that Everyday Zen does regularly. And to her left is the form of the women's lineage papers that we use within the Everyday Zen lineage, within a great circle with the person's name and the teacher's name in the middle. So I thought it would be nice to show you that as well. You can see many forms: seated, standing, accompanied by various powers. So compassion is strong and clear in all these ways. Although Manjushri is typically on the temple altar in the Zendo, in Zen temples, Kanon or Kuan Yin, I'll go back and forth through the talk, probably mostly Kuan Yin, I'll say, more familiar to us, really, I think, belongs there too. And I'll try to explain why I think that is. Especially as our temples fill with people with the bodies of women. And as women more and more sit on the teaching seat. So a special thank you, Roshi Joan, up in your refuge, for bringing Kuan Yin Kanon to Upaya for us, and for bringing her spirit to us in so many ways, not least of which this chaplaincy program, and your own embodiment of Kanon in your work to address the sufferings of the world. Thank you. Thank you. For those of you who have chanted with Upaya, you know that one of the, or any Zen temple, actually, one of the most regular parts of the liturgy is the Enmei Jiku Kanon Gyo, which is a short chant that is chanted 7 times. It's chanted in Soto Zen monasteries around the world. And it is a praise song to Kanon, to Kuan Yin, which we dedicate to the well-being of those who are suffering. We actually dedicate our whole practice to the well-being of those who are suffering. In the old Mahayana Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it is said that the Bodhisattvas are like birds. And of course, birds have 2 wings. One wing of the Bodhisattva is the wing of wisdom, and the other is the wing of compassion. I remember when I first encountered this teaching, it was very profound for me. This idea of these 2 wings that are so needed, because of course, without both wings, birds can't fly. And without both wings, the wing of compassion and the wing of wisdom, bodhisattvas can't fly. They can't do their work in the world. They can't fulfill their vows to be of benefit and to awaken beings. And so what are these 2 wings? So, and this is Manjushri and Kanon, there in the Zendo. The Bodhisattva understands, because of wisdom, that there really are no separate beings, just one interconnected whole. And there's only an illusion of separation. But the Bodhisattva also sees with the heart, with compassion, the sufferings of beings who feel themselves to be separate. And so, of course, the Bodhisattva responds to that suffering. Emptiness and form and emptiness working together for awakening. So, to sit between Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and Kanon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, is to be held by the wings of bodhisattvas in the play of form and emptiness. That's what we're doing when we sit zazen. And we don't need to be sitting in the Zendo at Upaya to feel this. Wherever we are, this is true. And we are surrounded by bodhisattvas. It's very important, I think, not to think of the bodhisattva as the statue here, or the bodhisattva as somehow existing in some heavenly realm. There are bodhisattvas everywhere in many forms, whether we recognize them or not. And we ourselves are bodhisattvas, as much as we might not feel that we are, but I guarantee there are bodhisattvas here tonight. Recently, in June, I was teaching a hidden lamp retreat with my co-editor, Sue Moon, in an Italian Zen monastery. And I was surprised to find that there they call those who are practicing with them, not students, not Zen students, but bodhisattvas. And I thought that was really beautiful, a good reminder. Years ago, someone gave me a small Tibetan tanka of 1,000-armed Kuan Yin, which is another form of Kuan Yin. Maybe Kodo, you could show us, for those who have not seen 1,000-armed Kuan Yin. The person who, there we go. Oh, we had one last one. That was the moon and Kuan Yin. There she is. Isn't that lovely? But the next one is the 1,000-armed. What looks like a circle around the figure is actually hands with eyes in the middle of them. And then in the middle of all those other arms and hands are holding various implements. And the person who gave this to me was thinking of my work in ministry and how ministry requires 1,000 arms, which I would agree it does. So does the work that Roshi Joan is engaged in keeping Upaya going. Definitely at least 1,000 arms. And in this form of Kuan Yin, each of the 1,000 hands holds an implement to help sentient beings. Implements both ordinary and extraordinary. That vase with healing nectar, the mirror of wisdom, monks' staffs, jewels, a rope, a hook, a scroll, all the many different ways of helping. I want to tell you tonight about a 1,000-armed Kuan Yin who I know personally. When the pandemic arrived here in central Illinois, mid-March of 2020, 3.5 years ago, we were very lucky to have a fearless and fiercely compassionate county public health director, who I realized over the months and years is a 1,000-armed Kuan Yin. Julie Pride is like no one I have ever met. An out gay woman who began working in public health here during the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. She fought tooth and nail to protect our county and our community, hiring a small army of contact tracers within days of COVID's arrival, finding housing for those without homes who could no longer safely stay in shelters, willing to close down restaurants whose owners insisted that the pandemic was a hoax and they could do whatever they wanted, even when her actions resulted in pickets and death threats. I had the privilege of working with her on several things during this time. The first, on March 11th, 2020, of reaching as many of the ministers in town as we could. At that time, I was serving the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Champaign-Urbana. And so I had a lot of connections, including with the pastors of the Black churches. And we got more than 100 ministers and pastors, clergy on a Zoom call, one of the first. So she could explain why they needed to do the unthinkable, shut down their churches before the next Sunday, where many, many more people would be ill and dying. It was because of Julie that I brought my 92-year-old mother living in a seniors community to live with me twice during the worst times of the pandemic, because Julie realized almost from the beginning, before other people were even thinking about it, that anywhere where seniors lived closely together would become death traps. And she was right, and probably saved my mother's life. She's still alive at 95, along with countless others. I don't know when Julie slept during the first 18 months of the pandemic. I know she didn't and couldn't take a vacation. I know her spirit grew weary and worn, but she never turned away, no matter how ugly and dispiriting things became. 2 years into the pandemic, after watching her with awe and humility, I gave her my tanka of the 1,000-armed Kuan Yin in the form of, and I told her, I'm not sure if this made sense to her, she's not a Buddhist, but that she was a manifestation of the compassion of Kuan Yin and of those 1,000 arms in the form of, and this word really hardly describes her, a government bureaucrat. It hangs in her office to this day, and I hope that Kuan Yin protects and encourages her. But I should warn you, before we go any further in this talk, that you may hear some things tonight that might strain the bounds of your rational mind, if that's the way you lean, because I am a devotee of Kuan Yin and have been for many years. And maybe you'll understand a bit more why I might refer to myself in that way by the end of this talk, why this is the case for me. That tanka was not the only Kuan Yin in my house. As you can see, there's one behind me. Just about every room in my house has an altar to Kuan Yin. Statues or paintings from Japan, China, made by friends, given to me, ones that have traveled with me, lived in my car with me, made of wood, brush and ink, bronze, ceramic, porcelain. Kodo, could you just show a few of my Kuan Yin while I speak? So I thought you might enjoy seeing some of my household Kuan Yins. But of course, Kuan Yin is not in these statues or paintings. Kuan Yin is in the world, in the form of people like Julie Pride, and people you know, I have no doubt, and in our own hearts. And I'm going to tell you 2 mysterious stories about how she has shown up in my life. These stories were published in a book by Sandy Boucher called She Appears, Encounters with Kuan Yin, Goddess of Compassion. And Kodo might be able to put the link in the chat if you're interested in this book. The stories I'm going to tell you tonight are true, as near as any writing is the truth. So it was early spring of 2006, quite a while ago now, at the Spirit Rock Meditation Center in California. And I was near the end of a 2-month silent meditation retreat there. I had been a student of both Vipassana and Zen for quite a long time then, but this was the longest time I had been in silent retreat. It's an extraordinary experience. It felt like my mind and heart had become transparent, like a clear mountain lake. And from this very subtle and slowed down state, I could actually see moment to moment how our suffering begins, like being at the source of the Mississippi. You know, when you're at the mouth of the Mississippi, there's no way you're even swimming across that river. But the source of the Mississippi, you can just step across. And I could see this tiniest trickle, the way that I won't say we, but I do think it's probably we, lean into the next moment, a desire from one moment to the next, and how stuck I was in that lean. And for days, I felt right at the edge of understanding why that is, but unable to walk through to the other side. So on this particular night, it was raining. It was a very rainy month in California. It had been raining for about the half of the 2-month retreat. And it was late, very late, long after most people had gone to sleep. And I went for a walk in the rain and dark through the closed retreat area of Spirit Rock, carrying my dilemma with me. The rain was beating on my umbrella, on the branches of the bay laurels that were all bent down and glistening. Mud was running in rivulets across the road. And on the way back to my room, I went by the Spirit Rock Gratitude Hut, as it's called, a small octagonal hut, less than 10 feet across, that's filled with photos and quotes of the great Buddhist teachers of the 20th century, those who have been teachers of the teachers at Spirit Rock. So Coda, maybe you could show us that, that image of the little octagonal hut. Out of gratitude myself for my experience at Spirit Rock, I had voluntarily begun taking care of this little hut. I would go in, I would sweep it every day, just inspired by the wisdom represented in those simple black and white photos. And so that night, this late rainy night, I decided to go inside. I opened the wooden door, which you can see there, and closed it behind me to keep out the rain. I could hear the water of from my umbrella dripping on the floor, and it was black as a moonless midnight inside that hut. It was spooky to stand in total darkness with the rain thundering on the roof, and it did not feel like the same sweet place that I swept out earlier in the day. I stood in front of the altar there with my hands together, but I could be anywhere because the darkness was so absolute. And I asked silently with all my heart for help. Help me to move beyond my narrow view. Help me to wake up. Help me to know the truth of my life. Half consciously, as I stood there, I noticed a slight glow to my right near one of the benches along the wall. I continued to stand with my silent prayer, and I don't know for how long, many minutes. Then I turned back to the door and I opened it to the rain. There's a light outside on the path, and it shone in and across that little space. And I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I half turned, and there, sitting quietly on the bench, was a small, ordinary-looking Asian woman about my age with long braids. I was utterly shocked and startled. How could we have both been in that tiny space for so long? Why didn't she say anything? How strange it must have been for her to hear me come in and then for me to stand there for so long. I whispered, "Sorry, I didn't see you," and fled, my heart beating wildly. I walked up the hill towards my room, oblivious to the rain, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I realized that she should also have been visible when I opened the door to enter the hut, and I had seen no one. I remembered the glow to my right as I prayed for help. My mind split. One side, the supposedly rational side, said, it must have been one of the Asian women on retreat here. No one from outside the retreat center could have been in that hut so late at night in the rain behind the gate that you aren't supposed to go through. There are 3 Asian women here. I'll ask and apologize when the retreat is over. But I couldn't imagine how any human being could have stayed so utterly still, not even the sound of breath, in total darkness, while another person stood less than 3 feet away, almost close enough to touch. So you could probably take down the image of the hut. Thanks. The other side of my mind said, you nitwit, that was no fellow retreatant in there, or even if it was, this wasn't an ordinary encounter. That was Kuan Yin. You met a goddess in the gratitude hut, and all you could do was say, I'm sorry, and run away? When I got back to my reassuringly calm and ordinary room, I found a blank piece of paper and a pen. I was trembling, as perhaps people have always trembled after an encounter with something unfathomable. I drew all the symbols of Kuan Yin that I knew: the moon, the willow branch, the vase with which she pours healing waters on the world, and I propped the piece of paper up on my altar. I did 3 full bows, apologized for not recognizing her, and thanked her for hearing my call for help. Meanwhile, one side of my mind was nattering on. Oh, you're going to feel like a fool when you find out it was one of the people sitting here on this retreat. After that encounter in the gratitude hut, in the final days of the retreat, I kept Kuan Yin very close to my heart, and I brought that compassionate view of Kuan Yin to my question, this koan. Why, since I truly believe my holding on to the self that leans into the next moment was an illusion, why did that illusion feel so real and so permanent? One morning, 2 days later, as I sat in front of my fellow retreatants, waiting to strike the big bell to end the meditation period, a phrase arose in my mind. In this whole world, there is not even a grain of sand to hold on to. And with that, my whole story about who I was and what I was holding on to just fell apart. If I could have gotten up and danced with joy at that moment, I would have, which I think is funny because normally we wouldn't think that that was such a joyful thing to realize there was nothing to hold on to, but it was for me at that moment. I understood in my very cells that whatever I thought, whatever I believed, whatever I was sure I was holding on to, the truth was that nothing whatsoever could be held onto. It was all fine, whether I knew it or not. But at that moment, I did know it, and I was free. For those of you who have been on retreat, you know that all retreat experiences and insights are subject to fading and impermanence, just like everything else. But since that moment, there is still something that subtly permeates my everyday existence, even years later, an inner knowing. I've often wondered what that is. And during that same retreat, I would go up on the hill up above the retreat center to watch the sunrise every morning, which of course changed over the course of the retreat. And some days I saw the sun come up in all its glory over the hills. And some days it was fog or clouds and I couldn't see the sun. But because I went every day and I had kind of learned what time the sun was coming up, I knew it was there, even if I couldn't see it on that particular day. It has been the same with the understanding of that morning as I sat behind the big bell. I would forget, it would become a story just like I told you, but not entirely. The sun of reality is still shining, no matter how thick the clouds of confusion that obscure it. Well, you're probably wondering what happened at the end of the retreat when we were no longer in silence. I asked each of the Asian women on the retreat if they had been in the gratitude hut on that rainy night. Each looked at me very oddly and said, no. I'm left with this unexplainable gift. Second story. As if that wasn't enough. A year after the retreat, I was ordained as a Soto Zen priest, which actually I had sewed my robes 10 years before. And then a lot of things had happened in my life, most of them unpleasant, and it hadn't been the time. And after the retreat, I went to my teacher, Norman Fisher, and I said, much to my surprise, I didn't even know I was going to say it, I am so grateful for this practice. I would like to ordain so I can give back. So there I was on Samish Island up in Washington State, being ordained. And the 8-year-old daughter of a friend came to the ordination ceremony. When Maya, that was her name, was 6, so yes, I know she carries the name of Buddha's mother, I had been with her and her parents as she lay in Children's Hospital in Seattle, desperately sick with a very rare and usually fatal illness, not even fully diagnosed for quite a while, deep in a medically induced consciousness, and her mother, who was 8 months pregnant with her second child, absolutely wild with fear. In that time, I had done many well-being services for Maya, calling on Kuan Yin to help her on the forces of compassion. And now here she was, healthy again, but mysteriously mature in the way of a child who has come close to death and come back. While the ceremony was happening, she ran outside the meditation hall for a few minutes, out into the late afternoon sunlight. And at the end of the ceremony, she presented me with a gift, a poem she had written under the weeping willow outside the meditation hall. And the poem went like this. The willow is praying under the oak tree. The willow is praying under the oak tree. I pray with the willow tree. The willow is always praying with me. And remember, in many of the images of Kuan Yin, including the one that I drew that night at Spirit Rock, she carries a willow branch. So the next morning after my ordination, I put on my okesa, Buddha's robe, for the first time after the ceremony as a priest. And I walked along the shoreline overlooking these great mud flats and sand flats of Samish Bay. And I thought, this is it. This is the job I've always been called to be the hands and eyes and feet and ears of Kuan Yin. Now I know absolutely what my job is. This is where I truly belong, finally. And although that was 15 years ago now, I don't think I ever forget that. When I put my okesa on or my rakusu on, I always know that I'm doing what I'm meant to do. I don't ever have to wonder. I suspect that the great forces of compassion in the world, personified as Mother Mary, because we have them, these female forces of compassion are everywhere, or Kuan Yin, do not actually come when we call them, despite the old stories, including the one I just told. They're here all the time, like that hidden figure in the dark gratitude hut, waiting with a deep and inexhaustible patience for us to take our true seat. They're hidden all around us, in others, and also within us, and it's up to us to notice, whether in our own desperate call for help, in the ancient eyes of an 8-year-old child come back from the edge, or in our own hearts. All we have to do is listen to the people we know, to open the daily news for eyes to look for her, and you will see her. A friend of mine on Maui and his family narrowly escaped the fire this week. And I'm sure many of you have been following this, including the real failure by governmental entities, both to warn people and also now to provide relief. And just to say, if you haven't read Rebecca Solnit's book, who of course is another friend of Upaya, A Paradise Built in Hell, it actually talks about 5 major catastrophes in the 20th century. And this is the pattern. Governments fail, systems fail in a major disaster. But what doesn't fail is the natural human instinct to respond, to help each other right in the middle of it. And there are so many stories. So my friend sent an email to let us know that he and his family were safe. And he wrote, There's still a lot of emotional, oh, their property burned, but not their house. So in their whole neighborhood, many people did lose their houses and their lives. And he wrote, there's still a lot of emotional processing to do, but for now, I'm feeling inspired by all the acts of heroism, care, and offers of help I've seen. We humans really do an amazing job of coming together when we need to. And just yesterday, I read about a man on Maui who died as he was sheltering with his body, a beloved golden retriever who belonged to his friend. And there are endless stories, endless, countless as the sands of the Ganges, stories of compassion and heroism on Maui, in Ukraine, in all the places of tragedy and disaster, if we only open our eyes and listen and look. There Kuan Yin appears again and again. There is so much more I could say. This was a hard talk to keep. Maybe I'll have to do a Kuan Yin part 2. But I will end with this. As the great Japanese Soto Zen master Uchiyama Roshi once said, though we can never be fully aware of all the suffering in the world, we should call out the name Kanon Bosatsu with our whole spirit, that we may be one with the suffering. Thank you.